Climate change is often not exactly the most important political issue in some places. Of course, people think it's very important in some political parties, in some countries. Maybe here in the United States, it's always kind of in the background, but important to many people. But in these countries, it's literally a matter of life and death. And again, it's all tied together because migration is a multiple reasons for migration, multifactorial situation. But one of the reasons is climate change and environmental devastation, hurricanes, storms, floods, landslides. These force people to leave their homes, desperate people who have nowhere to go and seek safety where they can.
Well, we appreciate your work all week. Thank you very much for keeping us across what happened at the summit. Rob Reynolds, live for us in Los Angeles. Thank you. Meanwhile, a group of thousands of Central American asylum seekers and migrants have had to stop their journey towards the US while they wait for paperwork. The Mexican issued humanitarian visa allows them to transit freely towards the US border. Manuel Raplo is in Chiapas state with some of those trying to make the journey north.
Cries of desperation from migrants in Huixla, Mexico. They're calling on authorities to grant them humanitarian transit visas. After waiting for days, this family from Venezuela have finally had their paperwork approved. The documents allow them to move freely through Mexico and make their way toward the U.S. southern border.
After almost 3 weeks, this represents one less obstacle. At least now we have a permit to transit the country. Now we need to figure out how to get the money for bus tickets and try to look for work.
Most of these people arrived here as part of a migrant caravan that left the city of Tapachula, near Mexico's border with Guatemala, on Monday. The mass of people marching on the road seemed endless. Frustrated with the slow pace, some moved on ahead. Other people chose to wait for their transit visas. And in just a few days, what was once a caravan of thousands mostly ceased to exist. Maria and Oscar, also from Venezuela, have decided to make their way toward Mexico City by bus, along with their young daughter and about a dozen other migrants. They're exhausted, but optimistic that their hardships will soon be over.
The truth is, this has been very difficult. We crossed the jungle, there were many people who died, others who couldn't go any further. I don't wish what we've been through on anyone. We've experienced hunger and thirst, but we have many hopes and dreams of arriving at our destination.
It's a long road toward the Mexican capital. Once there, they'll only be a few days away from arriving on the doorstep of the United States.
With their transit visas in hand, many migrants will continue north aboard buses like the one we're on now. Those traveling without the necessary paperwork run the risk of being detained and sent back to southern Mexico to start their journey again. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Chiapas, Mexico.
Inflation in the United States has hit a 40-year high. It's being driven by the rising cost of food and petrol. The Federal Reserve is expected to hike interest rates again next week, putting even more pressure on household budgets. Paddy Culhane filed this report from Washington, D.C.
Inflation in America is beginning to bite, now the highest it's been in 40 years. Prices rising 8.6% over the year through May. And it isn't just about numbers, it's about sacrifice.
It's rough. I mean, everything is so high. Yeah, it's taking all your money and then you just have to sit down and eat less.
It means Americans' paychecks simply don't go as far as they used to. Flying costs 37% more. Rent, that's up almost 7%. And food is across the board more expensive. The price of chicken up 5% in a year.
You might find chicken at one price for the same weight and then go back and it's different.
Higher.
Yes, a little bit higher.
The biggest increase by far, gas. It is up by almost 50% in just a year. According to Gas Buddy, that's a website that tracks costs, the average gallon of gas in the U.S. is $5, the highest it has ever been. There are numerous reasons for the rising prices. A spike in food and energy costs resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine is one.
Putin's price hike is hitting America hard.
But other prices are rising because of the ongoing supply chain issues triggered by the COVID pandemic. There's too much demand, not enough supply, and a shortage of transportation capacity. President Joe Biden is also blaming company consolidation for many of the increases.
There are nine major ocean line shipping companies that ship from Asia to the United States. 9. They form 3 consortia. These companies have raised their prices by as much as 1,000%.
Congress is poised to pass a bill that would give U.S. regulators more power over the shipping companies, but that likely won't have an immediate impact. And next week, the Federal Reserve is poised to raise interest rates again, meaning debt will be that much more expensive for Americans.
And when interest rates keep rising, people feel, well, credit is less easy to access. It's harder to buy a home. That's also, a negative. But these are the sorts of things that have to happen. The bank needs to take action. It is taking action.
An attempt to stabilize the U.S. economy, with Americans paying a heavy price. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
International travellers to the United States will no longer have to take a coronavirus test to enter the country. The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the measure is no longer necessary. Most non-citizens still have to show proof of vaccination to enter the country, though. Hundreds of thousands of hectares of protected jungle in Colombia's Amazon rainforest is being destroyed every year. Trees are being burnt or cut down to make space for cattle ranching, mining and drug growing operations. In the first of 2 reports, Al Jazeera's Alessandro Rampietti flies over the Amazon to assess the damage.
An illegal road cuts through what used to be pristine rainforest. A cemetery of centuries-old trees reduced to dust.
Look, those are big patches and most likely for cocoa fields or cattle ranching, which will definitely disconnect this area.
Rodrigo Botero runs an NGO that protects the Colombian Amazon. He brought us on a 5-hour-long flight across 5 national parks and supposedly protected indigenous lands. None are intact. Criminal hands are grabbing land and burning trees for intensive agriculture, cattle ranching, or coca farming.
The magnitude and the intensity of the destruction that we are able to see over 5 national parks in the most biodiverse area of Colombia in the middle of the fragile transition between the Andes and the Amazon is a warning call not only for Colombia, but for humanity as a whole.
The Colombian Amazon has lost over 1 million hectares of rainforest in the last 5 years, an area larger than the island of Cyprus. Rodrigo says a complex web of interests are to blame.
First of all, this has to do with the international conglomerates interested in cheap land for the world's agro-commodities market. More than 1 million heads of cattle have been introduced in this area surrounding the Chiribiquete National Park alone. It is also a way to launder money trafficking and illegal mining.
The level of deforestation accelerated after the government signed a peace deal with FARC rebels in 2006. Today, huge ranches extend for as far as the eye can see.
One of the first things you notice as you walk through these burnt patches of the jungle is the silence. Gone are the sounds of the animals, the birds, the insects that live in the forest. All that amazing biodiversity turned into ashes.
Colombian President Iván Duque pledged to cut deforestation by half by the end of